What's up, Flow Riders? Let's do this. It is time, y'all, for another one of those show type things. We're gonna do a quick little housekeeping, and then we'll start the show. Do my basic countdown. From the countdown, we get started. Don't forget, if you have any cues, cue them, cue colon, so we can A them after the show. Every once in a while, if it's really good, it might fly in the middle, but normally we save the Q&A for the end. And yeah, let's try to keep it podcasting today. Don't ask me questions about Tom Brady and the Raiders. I'm just saying. All right, anyway. So let's get it started. Let's get it started. No, I'm not distracting, and I am not downloading Final Cut from my iPad right now. Anyway, let's do this. We have a guest today, and also remember, folks, follow your links, put your questions in. Let's keep it relevant. Let's do this. I'm excited. I'm too excited about camp. That's what it is. I'm excited
Yeah.
about camp. I get to finally beat up Paul in real life.
Gonna put Paul in a protective bubble so that he can fight back. I love it.
Oh my god, it's gonna be so much fun. It's just like, wow, it's so amazing. Anyway, let's get started. We gotta get this show on the road. Let me just make sure everything is good here. Everything is gravy. I need a little bit of water. All right, everybody, you guys ready? Let's do this. Here we go, Flow Riders. Woo side out real quick. And counting down in 5, 4. Aloha, Flow Riders, and welcome to another edition of The Flow. I'm your community manager, Doc Rock, along with my awesome co-host.
Hey everyone, it's Katie.
She's switching up on me 2 weeks in a row.
There's always going to be this pause though, because I'm like madly waving. so Luis will have to cut out my waving. Like, Katie, the podcast listeners cannot see you waving, but I'm going to wave anyway.
That's the best. That's the best. All right, gang. Today we have ourselves a special guest, and we're going to talk about some workflows that work. I know Katie came up with that title. I like it.
I know, yeah. Katie is super excited. I'm also like horribly grainy today, so I do apologize to everyone who is watching me on the video. The replay will be fine because Luis is awesome and I'm recording my video, but sorry in advance.
It goes to say again, people, it's one of the things that I think a lot of people get sort of mixed up. You can have like 6,000 by 6,000 up and down. Your internet might be fine, but from you to Luis, there might be 19 to 20 computers in the middle, right? I think people assume that when you call Luis, it goes from your computer to Luis's computer, and mine goes from me to Luis. I probably have somewhere in the ordinance of 30 computers that it gets passed off to. So right after it leaves you, somewhere in Amesbury, there's a master hub. And then from there, it'll probably go to the next city till it makes its way down to Boston proper, where the real pipe might be. And that pipe's going to slide to New York. And then from New York, it'll work its way down. So it's a thing. It's not just you. So just so you know, like a lot of people freak out by that. And no, sometimes you can have everything right and it's still going to do goofy because that's just the way it's called, the internet. Net has little teeny cells. All right, there you go. I'm done with that. No more nerd talk. Let's get started. Let's bring on our guest. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right, you guys ready for some workflow action?
Workflows.
I think this is gonna be good. So Joe, first of all, welcome to the flow. And I'm just like, I needed a button to press the button that make, like the whole Joe pop up. There you go. That's my workflow. Unmute yourself,
Oh, wait,
Joe.
we got Joe muted. Yeah, you're on mute.
Oh,
or maybe not.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Ooh, I hardware muted while I was off camera, but I hit that button. I guess a bunch
of things.
Yeah, it's a good habit, but now it's funny because that's an old school habit. I do it all the time, and we don't really have to do that anymore because the software does it, but it's a habit. I've been doing it for like 15 years. My fingers always want to do that.
I know. It's right here, like just right off my desk. You're talking about, I used to teach computer science at at the University of Scranton. So you're talking about how information gets from one computer to another, and I always used to describe that as you're taking a cross country road trip and you're stopping at rest stops along the way, and it takes
Yep.
longer, and they're also not the best places to hang out because your traffic can get intercepted if it's not encrypted. So
Yes, 100%. Yeah, that
yeah.
you
Oh,
know
like that.
before we dive into the workflow, you know what's really interesting that you might not know? A lot of cable companies buy houses that might have been ready to get torn down, and they turn
They
them
do.
into like relay houses. So they fireproof the walls.
Wow.
They basically make it air gap, so it's a totally controlled system, no dust, whatever, and all the equipment's hiding inside a house in your neighborhood, and you won't even know it unless you can bring up a FLIR drone, and you'll see one house is oddly perfectly temperatured all the way through, no hot spots. That is a secret house. It is power supplies and data centers and everything, and they spread them all around the house. I know that the company that begins with the S and ends with the they do that because I
Mm.
know where all three of them is in my neighborhood. My brother used to work for Spectrum.
Wow. That's better than, like, the
Oh,
giant
funny.
green box that would just sit on some people's lawns. I don't know if you remember that. It's
Yes,
just like
yes,
this.
yes.
Yeah.
The hub
Oh, I don't
boxes,
know
right.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you did, Katie. Everybody's seen them. Most people have never paid them attention. We've sat on them when we were kids. We drank on
That's
them when we were teenagers. We tagged them. If you were from New
Yep,
York, you put in
that's
West
right.
Side. Everybody has seen them, and yet nobody knows what they are. In my neighborhood, they covered them.
I'm
They
the least
vinyl wrapped them
observant
with
person out
flowers.
there, so
Yep.
Yeah. I will show you the one in Amesbury the next time I'm there. I'll find it and show it to you because they have to be there. Otherwise, you can't do this.
Mhm.
All right, let's go. Let's get in. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about the
Mhm.
Joe self. Tell us
Alright,
about
well,
Joe self. Sorry,
I
sorry.
I'm a father of 3, so I appreciate a good pun, a good cheesy pun. I am a podcast and automation coach, so I love talking about podcast workflows. I also have my master's in software engineering. I like to tell people I'm a recovering WordPress developer. I did that for 20 plus years, or web development for 20 plus years. I live outside of Philly now, but I am from New York, about an hour north of the city. So
Oh, perfect.
always
You're in
always
good
feel like
company.
I need to tell people that, because, I'll wear my Yankee hat sometimes in Philadelphia, put a target on my back. I know, and I'm very bold. I won't wear my Giants jersey, my New York Giants jersey, because that's even worse. But I love automation. I'm a solo entrepreneur with a family of 5 and 3 kids, and my wife and me. And so I try to take as much off of my plate as possible, and I want to help other coaches and solo automator or entrepreneurs and podcasters do the same thing.
That is super
Oh,
cool. I'm like you, but I got kicked out of New York because I'm actually a diehard Red Sox fans.
Oh
Like,
man,
dyed
my
in the wool.
condolences on the baseball season
I know, right?
so far.
It's super sad. But
I
yeah,
know.
but I fit in really well when I go to Boston to go hang out with the
yep.
company, so it's all good. All right, uh, Katie, what's your first question? I know you've probably been dying to ask one of these. Katie is the workflow
Well,
queen.
I know. Well, I'm working at it. I'm working at workflows, which is why it's been fun for the journey. And I would say, I guess, how do you get started with workflows? And that's probably a much bigger question than than we can fit into this episode. But my biggest challenge, as we were saying, even before we jumped onto this show, is that I have really great intentions, and I even block off time to set aside for building out workflows and thinking about automations and approaching it. And then it's kind of easy for me then, once I've blocked off that time, to be like, oh, distraction over here, and move on and not actually set up the workflow. So yeah, how do you approach building workflows for clients who are like, I know I need this, but I don't know how to get started?
Yeah, so this is a great question, right? And it starts with like knowing what you do and where you spend your time. So I'm a big proponent, less a practitioner, if I'm being honest, of time tracking.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing something new. You wanna know how much time you're spending on something, and you wanna know exactly what you're doing, right? So usually I'll
Right.
tell people, my coaching clients or my students, write down everything you do. If we're talking about podcasting, I'll say, write down everything you do to produce one episode. Leave nothing out, right? Because
Oh, let's all do that. Yeah.
yeah, so like sometimes it'll be like, oh yeah, well I send a guest a Calendly link, and then like I send them some other stuff, and I'm like, but what do you send them, right? Because like one of those things, right, is that you send them, you could redirect. You can use the redirect in Calendly, and then you don't have to
Yep.
send them that link anymore, right? They sign up and they
Hmm.
get that link automatically. Um, so that's the first thing that we'll go through, and then I'll say, okay, what are the things that you do but you personally don't need to do? And
So
I hate to br-
yes.
I hate to break it to everybody, but most of the things you do, you personally don't need to do, right? Someone else can do it and might do it better, right? My VA like does a better job at gathering the show notes than I do at this point. Um, that's the second question. The third question, this is where nuance kicks in, right? Does a person have to do it versus does a robot have to do it? And the things the
Mm,
robot can do are the things that you can automate. So my favorite example is guest scheduling, right? Instead of doing the email dance of, oh, what works for you? What time can you do it? Oh, what time zone are you in? Eastern Standard. Oh, but we're in daylight time now. The hours are all messed up. We changed our clocks last week. You're not changing yours till next week. Um,
I don't change
you
mine
just
at all.
yeah. Yep. Hawaii
you
problems.
live in Arizona where you just change time zones, right? Like that's like Arizona has its own time zone listing.
Yep.
Parts of Arizona. Send them a Calendly link, right? Or a Savvy Cal link or whatever. Send them a scheduling link that will just automatically figure that out, right? And then again, inside the scheduling link, you can include a Zoom call or an Ecamm live link or a whatever, right? I use Riverside. I have a studio just for my main podcast, and it's the same
Mhm.
link every time. So that's just the location. And then if you are on a paid account, you can redirect after people schedule. So you can say, like, oh, instead of showing them a thank you note or a thank you text, send them to
Yep.
this link. So I always send people to my guest notes. Hey, here's what to expect. Wear headphones, please. Please wear headphones, right? That's like most of the text on that page. Um, and so that one workflow saves people lots of time, right? And then we could take it one step
Yeah.
further from well, I've been talking a lot, so I'll stop here if there are other clarifying
No, no,
questions.
I think
Yeah.
no, I think that's great, and that it's funny, like, that one absolutely is the easiest one because yeah, and I haven't even gone through the process yet of kind of laying out all of my time and the different steps that we take for I mean, we've talked about it, but I haven't actually, like, sat through and really been diligent about laying everything out, but that one was definitely an easy fix, and I mean, Doc and I also do, like, other different kinds of things for Ecamm, so recently, Doc's been doing all of these amazing Ecamm master classes, and but he had his own Calendly link because, you know, he runs his own business as well and does a bunch of other stuff. So we're like, oh, we need to like pull this Calendly link in so that I can see and be like kind of the admin to Doc's scheduling and make sure that like
Mhm.
we have everything all set up on the Ecamm channels and everything's all ready to go. So yeah, it is. I feel like that's a good low lift if you're watching and or listening and you're like, oh, I really just want to be able to get started in workflows and you do any kind of guest management, that one does save a ton of time because you're saying the same thing over and over to people. And after a while, it's like, and even I'm like, I'm a fast typer. It doesn't really matter. It matters.
Yeah.
You are losing a lot of time. You
Right.
think it doesn't, but it does.
Yeah. And the thing I love about
Duck's
Calendly,
laugh. I
which
can see Duck laughing.
um which I think Savvy Cal also does now is it can also send like the follow-up email, right? So like the
Yeah.
Yep.
post appointment email or post call email, which I always well, I get the headshot on the front end now, but like in it's always a thank you
Yeah.
for your time. Your episode will I'll email when
Yep.
when your episode comes out. What's your address? I'd love to send you a thank you note. And I have postcards and I do handwritten notes. Um, if they enjoyed it,
Yeah.
right? If they don't want to give me their address, that's fine. But so that
Yeah.
sort of like I'm leveraging automation there to add a personal touch. Because people are
Yeah.
like, you actually
Mhm.
wrote this. And I'm like, yeah, with a fountain pen. I love fountain pens. So
Same.
I
yeah.
And you
I
saved all
want
the
to
time from not do all
Yeah.
the back and forth.
Yeah.
I want to bring up something that you said that I think a lot of creators miss, and a lot of creators get stuck in the concept of doing a VA. Yesterday, I had my annual eye doctor appointment, which I completely forgot about. And then I go in and, you get dilated and stabbed in the eye to check to see if you have glaucoma. Still don't. um, and
Excellent news, talk.
Yes.
what was funny is so Dr. Bosser walks in and she's like saying stuff, and I heard this voice come out of her iPad, and I kind of wanted to go like that, but there was something stabbing me in the eye. And she was like, oh yeah, sorry, that's Kenneth, that's my VA. And then so Kenneth was repeating what she was saying and taking the notes so that way she doesn't miss anything. And believe it or not, now that more and more medical people are doing that, they're having less and less minor mistakes because you have two
Yeah.
people watching, right? And in the past, it used to be sometimes they'd have another doctor standing behind them taking notes while they're doing it, like, Dr. House style. But that's becoming, harder for them to do. Their field is having a lot of shrinkage because people are just can't afford the school, or it's just getting cost prohibitive. So I thought it was really cool that doctor had her VA on, basically on a conference call, like shouting out everything she was saying and taking notes. I actually felt more comfortable. I know she's like, oh, some people get weird when they hear Kenny talking in the back, and I'm like, nah, because he won't miss nothing if
Yeah.
because her and I'll be cracking jokes or saying stupid stuff, and yeah, it was just really, really incredible. And so I asked her, I was like, oh, why'd you get started doing that? It's because she had a shoulder surgery, so for a long time she couldn't write the notes herself. She could still
Mm,
use the other hand to check your eye, but she couldn't write the notes. And then now she did it, she would never give it up. She's like, it's the best thing ever. So could you talk a
yeah.
little
Yeah,
bit about that?
it's so interesting, right? Because I have a VA almost as a forcing function as well, right? During the pandemic, my wife is a nurse, so she was one of the few people who didn't get to work from home. But
Yeah.
all the schools were closed. The number of my children tripled throughout the course of the pandemic. We had one at the start, we had three by the end. Um, and so a lot of the child rearing for half the week was just on me. And I was like, if I want to run a bit, like if I want to keep running my business, then I need
Mhm.
someone to do things on the days I can't do anything. And so I found a VA. She is in the Philippines. I try to pay her as well as I can because she does a lot of stuff for me. But she takes a lot of stuff off my plate that I don't have to think about anymore. And if I'm like if I get behind or I need to do something, if I need to publish it more quickly than she does, I end up going to the documentation that she created based on the videos I made for her because I've forgotten how to do it. And so it's been a huge help in my business taking things again because I'm solo. I want to stay as a single business owner. Um,
Yeah.
and she's taken off a lot of things off of my plate that would prevent me from working on, the important work that helps me grow my business.
That's really cool. That's
I bet
very
you
good.
even doing the I bet you even doing those videos to like help her understand what you need for her to jump on and do is helpful as well. Like again, it's kind of I feel like that's a great way to start approaching all of this. So often we get really busy and we get really focused on everything that we're doing. And I'm 100% talking to myself as well, but it's, realizing kind of what you're doing is really good, and having to explain what you're doing to get someone else to help you is going to help you figure out like where those pain points are, what you're doing that's kind of a bonkers process, or or yeah, where you can simplify or streamline or automate. So
Yeah, I mean, those were the first SOPs, standard operating procedures, I've ever created for my business.
yeah,
I've been
yeah.
freelancing since high school, since I was 14 years old. I got my first web design client, and it wasn't until I was 35 or whatever, that I had, like, my first SOPs because I created these videos. I just narrated what I was doing, and I said, "Transcribe these and write out the steps for this process." And that was the first thing. It also provides some verification that she understood the task. And
Yep.
now we have a handbook, right? We have the Good House Media Handbook.
There you
So
go.
how do you go about finding a VA? Is it what kind of process is it, and how do you approach making sure that you get one that works?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in this area. I can tell you what I did, which was I went to onlinejobs.ph. This is a
That's the
specifically
one.
Mhm.
Filipino community virtual assistant area, and this is good for, most of them are going to be English as a second language. They're really good at these the repetitive tasks with very clear outcomes, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things that I assigned my VA in the beginning was like, find me conferences to speak at. That is too nebulous a task,
Yeah.
right? It's really open ended. She needs to understand me and my area of expertise. Um, but like the publish my podcast episodes, right? That's really clear. Go and update the cover art for the automatically uploaded podcast from Transistor to YouTube to make it the actual cover art instead of just the standard art, right? Those are things that
Yep.
are really good for her. There are um like stateside VA or um online OMBs, online OBMs, online business managers, something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, where you can find them stateside, or boss assistants is someone I'm working with. They have a Canadian team, where their autonomy will be a little bit higher than that, right? So
Mm.
they'll take some time to understand you and your business, and then you could say like, find me conferences to speak at, book my plane ticket, whatever, things
Yeah.
like that. And so it really depends on your price range and the tasks that you're looking to have completed.
Doc just dropped that link in for anyone that
There
is
you go.
watching live. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
quick tip
go ahead.
on that. If
Yeah,
you list a job, you're going to get like thousands of applications.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So okay. So here's what's I know this just from doing it for other people. It's very important that you have exactly what you want done in mind. You have some form of SOP, even if that requires you to make a bunch of videos saying how you work, how you like to work, so forth, so on, etc. And one of the things I know a lot of my clients have always worried about getting a VA from the PI is that sounds really funny is like, oh, but what about the language barrier? I'm like, we live in Hawaii, like most of us have enough Tagalog built in, just from living here to cover what nobody
Hmm.
else can do. So don't freak out over that. But I said, now I guarantee you, if I was to give them an English test and then give you an English test, which one of you is going to fail? I'll put $1,000 on it. I am
Yeah.
amazed at the amount of well, Katie sees it every day from me, but I'm amazed at the amount of Americans that they're very fine at functionally verbal speaking English, but their written English is absolutely horrible. Whereas most of your VAs, most of the people outside of the country that study English, they study it from a level minus the cockiness, so they're actually better at it, believe it or not. Don't get
Yep.
dissuaded
Yeah.
by your spam emails. Your spam emails are people that are under stress to basically psych you out of your cash. It's a whole different conversation.
Yep.
Okay,
And I mean,
so
they're looking for low hanging fruit there, right? Like they're looking
yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
people who aren't proofreading. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
definitely and unfortunately they're catching them because otherwise that industry would have ate it a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. You are going to get a bunch, but you can fix that, by setting up email filters, making sure that they're saying the type of stuff that you want. And one of my friends did something, and she put a very specific line in her thing that says, "When you answer me back, make sure you include this." And all of the people that didn't include it automatically done because they can't follow,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
The
Um, I,
instructions. Yeah.
I took a test once for this agency I was working with when I was in real estate, and one of the questions of like we want to see if we'll be good to work together, and somewhere after the wire manhole covers round type of stuff, there was a question on a piece of paper, and it said, "Please write down how you are a detailed person." And everybody just answers away like how detailed they are, and of course they lie. And I was like, I don't know, probably better than you because I know how to spell detail. It's not Detale. And that was my thing. She's like, you're like the first person in like 30 people that we've interviewed to catch that. And I'm like,
Wow.
how? And I'm the worst speller in the planet, but like, how did you even read detail like chop off a tail?
Yeah.
And like nobody caught that. But yeah, super weird. And you can do things like that in order to help
Yeah.
mitigate the spam.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the classic story now, right? Van Halen always had in his their rider, uh, we want brown M&M, we want a bowl of only brown
Yeah.
M&Ms, right?
Yeah.
And the reason for that was they had a lot of pyrotechnics in their show. They needed a lot of things to be done perfectly well so that nobody got hurt. And they knew if they saw a bowl with not just brown M&Ms that they didn't read the rider carefully enough to make sure that they executed everything properly.
Yeah.
Oh, see,
Smart.
that's good. I always thought they were just being jerks.
High maintenance jerks. All right, I have more questions. I'm gonna hijack this interview from Doc. I'm getting ballsy
Please,
these days.
knock it out the
My
park.
I would like to know so obviously you're also in this podcasting space. So what are some of your favorite podcasting workflows that like you now couldn't even dream of living without?
All right, I'm gonna tell you a couple that sound really complicated, and I'm going to tell you, dear
Don't
listener,
panic,
and
everyone. Don't
Katie, yeah,
panic.
automation is iterative, right? So I have been automating my podcast for like 6 years now. So mine did not start like this. My favorite one is the guest onboarding flow, right? If you go to howibuilt.it/apply, you'll see a form there that has a bunch of information in it, right?
Mhm.
There's also like a slight tweak to that link that I can send to people whom I've personally invited onto the show. The reason I have it
Oh,
that
smart.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, is that people who apply get put into the guest pitches Airtable base for me to review those applications. The people who are invited get automatically sent to Calendly so that they
Bypassed.
can
Yeah.
book. Yeah. Anything
Mhm.
they filled out on that initial form, right? Because I asked for their headshot, so it uploads the headshot to Dropbox for me. But anything that they filled out in that form automatically gets passed to Calendly as well. After they fill out the Calendly link, they get put into my schedule, also in Airtable. It's like my episodes base, my podcast planner, um, that has their name and what we're talking about, and the day that they go live, because I basically just schedule in the order in which they show up. Um,
Mhm.
my episodes in the order in which they book, and then episode number and a Google Doc that is filled out based on the form as well. So there's a folder in Google
Nice.
Drive called Show Notes. I have a template. Um, I use make.com, formerly Integromat, for this. So the information from
Hmm.
Calendly gets sent to Google Drive. The form or the Google Doc is filled out with all of the information for the show notes, and then it gets shared with the guest. So if I have questions, specific questions, I can share them with them ahead of time. That link then gets put into Airtable. I do that because my VA, when this is all ready to publish, uses that Google Doc to create the show notes. So
Awesome.
that's all on the front end, the booking stuff. Calendly also handles the reminder emails and things like that. So
Mhm.
that's on the front end. I love that one because I do some guest outreach. I send them a link, and then I don't have to worry about
Yeah.
communicating with them. I don't have to worry about me forgetting to tell them something, right? Everything is
Yeah,
handled.
exactly.
I can look at my schedule and see like, oh, what's coming up? Oh, I only have like 2 guests and I usually like to remain like 4 to 6 episodes ahead. Do I need to schedule a solo episode? Do I need to grab a friend for an upcoming episode? Things like that. So that's all
Mhm.
on the front end before we record. That's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Very cool.
sense.
Very cool. You know what's
Uh,
funny is like it was years ago, even before Ecamm. I remember at one point I was listening to a couple episodes in a row because you had like um people that were sort of going into the content space, but this was like freaking eons ago. I couldn't even tell you. Maybe it was like 4 years ago. So it's
An
funny,
eternity ago.
yeah, it's kind of funny to think about it now. And then the one I heard recently though was West Cow, which is pretty cow. Sorry, I'll pronounce it properly. But yeah, I think that's I think the idea of building a workflow, even something as simple as like your post-production workflow, right? I think a lot of people get sort of worried about that. And a lot of things you can do if you set it up will make life easier. Like for editing videos, I always spend an extra 5 minutes to name all the files and put
Mm-hmm.
them in
Mm-hmm.
folders. And that
Yeah.
alone makes it easier. But most people refuse to do that and still struggle with, I'm having a hard time editing. I'm like, well, because your files aren't named or whatever. But just
Yeah.
renaming your files, simplest thing possible, and it'll take you an extra 10 minutes, but it will cut down your editing by a long shot.
Yeah. And file naming is crucial for me because that also kicks off automations in Airtable for me. So once
Mm.
I record, right? I record with Riverside, and Riverside has a Dropbox automation,
Mhm.
or a Dropbox integration, and so I can
Yeah.
download episodes automatically into Dropbox. Um, so I always make sure to name the episode number, guest name. Uh,
Mhm.
all of that information gets put into the file name that's downloaded, and then I use an app called Hazel. I love this app. It's
I
called
love
Hazel. It's
Hazel.
by
Yeah, we
Noodlesoft.
were talking about
Yes.
that a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And so like this will watch the Dropbox folder for any new files from Riverside.
Yep.
And let's just say I'm working with episode 316, right?
Mhm.
If there's not an episode 316 folder in my pre-production podcast folder, it will create that folder with the name. It'll put those files in there. And then when I am ready to do the last bit that I do before I never see the episode again until it hits my feed, um,
Yes.
is I write this. I'll write the summary and the top takeaways myself based on the notes I took. I'm experimenting with like some AI tools for this, but they're a little
Not there yet. Yeah.
opinionated. Yeah, they're
Opinionated.
they
You're like,
definitely
whoa,
pick
slow
one thing
down.
they want to
Yeah.
focus on that I didn't want to focus on. And then I'll record the cold open, right? And then I put the edit instructions. I usually just tell my editor. I've been working with him for like 5 years, so I'm just like, go, you know what to do. But if there's like specific things, usually if they curse, I want to keep that clean rating on my podcast. So I'll
Mhm.
usually like timestamp the swear words and be like, can you edit that out or like beep it out? Or he never beeps it. He always just edits out, which is like, I know that's nicer, but like one time, I just want to hear the beep. Anyway. Um, so I'll make my own edit notes. I'll put that in so it'll be like 316-instructions.txt. Once that'll be the last file that gets added. So once that gets added, the whole folder, Hazel moves the whole folder into the needs editing folder in Dropbox. Airtable updates to the status of episode 316 to needs editing. My editor gets an email. He edits it, he puts it back up in the like ready for publish folder. Again, make formerly Integromat is watching that folder. Again, the episode number is really important there because that's how it figures out which record to update. So
Mm.
316 then gets updated to ready for publish. My VA gets an email, and my transcriber gets an email. And my VA knows to gather everything. Most of it's in Airtable, create the images, publish it, and or schedule it for publish on the date in Airtable.
Wow.
So once I basically record the cold open and make my edit notes, I'm done with it until I see it in my feed on Monday mornings.
That's great. I can already, I'm like making a mental list of a few things that we definitely do manually. Like and it's working what we're doing, but we could certainly save a ton of time if we had, some of those tools watching different folders and things to be able to simplify that process.
Watch folders are gold, well,
Yeah.
absolute gold. Like when you finish a podcast, for instance, you get it with a lot of large files, right? And for us, because we're recording directly in Ecamm, that Ecamm recordings folder for me get psycho. Why? Because I'm
Hmm.
live 6 days a week, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm doing various shows constantly. So like I have Hazel go in basically every Saturday and move all of that stuff to the raid. Because if I didn't,
Yep.
I would always be running out of hard drive space on my computer. So
Yep.
Hazel, like anything older than this day, move it to the raid. And I use Finder tags to color everything, right? And so it knows what color is what, and it just put things in a various certain positions. What's funny is you mentioned make coming from Integromat. The one thing that's been crazy about automation for me and why I always get mad is because every one of the services that I've ever picked for pipes, starting with pipes, uh gets broken. Okay, so pipes was killing it, right? Okay, then
Mhm.
IFTTT, woo, nope, and now that one's horrible. Then you go to like Integromat, now it's Make, and then there's Zapier. And so a lot of the workflow assistants, they like to keep doing stuff and changing stuff. Have you ever had your workflows absolutely broken by one of your services?
Uh, knock on wood.
Ooh.
Um, the not that often. One of the reasons I like Make is because their emails are like really in your face when an automation breaks. Like more than Zapier is just like something happened. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I'm like, why are you paying? Why am I
Yes,
paying you $75 a month to be like, I don't know. Where
I don't
like
know.
Make is like, hey, something broke and you should probably fix it before we turn it off. And like, here's the data where it all broke,
Yeah, here's what
right?
you need. Yeah, here's what you need to figure out. Yeah.
Which like I mean, Zapier does that too. I just felt like their emails were like less. I feel
It's
way
tone
more
deaf. They're
urgency.
tone
Yeah,
deaf. You're right. They're
yeah.
so
I
tone
feel
deaf.
way more urgency with Make. The worst one for me, and this was totally my fault, I forgot to turn the automation on, was, I use ConvertKit for my email service
Yeah,
provider,
we do too.
for my
Yep.
mailing list.
Yep.
There a couple years ago, like, their embedded forms were just, like, ugly as sin and, like, really heavy from a, like, performance standpoint, like, they just threw in a bunch of JavaScript, and I didn't really like that, and I was like, "You know what? I can design a beautiful form using my I use Gravity Forms so in WordPress. I can with WordPress. And even better, I can include the referring link because this is something that ConvertKit doesn't do. It drives me crazy. I want to associate the link where someone signed up with their account so I know like what pieces of content are doing
Yeah, what
well.
made them sign up? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And so like I could use I have it's a custom field. I call it lucky URL. I don't know why I named it that, but it's just now it's like a little clever thing
I
to
like it.
past me. Um, I can send that URL too. It'll be great. And I tested it and it all worked. And then I forgot to turn it on for like a
Been
month.
there.
And
Yeah.
I was like, "How come no one's signing up for my mailing list?" I mean, like, a lot of people don't sign up anyway or didn't at that time, but, like, what's going on? And then, like, a month went by, and I decided to check. And, of course, I wasn't storing the information in WordPress, I was sending it all directly to ConvertKit.
Ugh.
So I missed, like, a month of email newsletter signups, and I tell myself, "Ah, it probably was, like, 3." But it probably was more than 3. So that was my fault. Always turn your automations on, which is another thing I really like about Make is it's like, hey, do you want us to save these changes that you're about to navigate away from? And like, hey, do you want us to turn this on? And Zapier's like, you probably know what you're doing, or at least they
Yeah,
were back then, right? Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
so
that's super
How
funny.
how much of it is so you said, which I think is genius, that it's an iterative process, and I completely agree. So like how now that you've been doing this for so long and like you this is, your business and what you're so amazing at. How what is the process where you're like, is this working well enough? Do I need to tinker with it or build on it or add something else versus like, I'm great. Everything is
yeah.
working really well.
Yeah, so usually what I'll tell people is if you find yourself doing this multiple times a week, right? Let's just say you've done it like 5 times in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
It might be worth automating, right? So like I would manually email my editor to let him know when a new episode was out. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Robots can
Yeah.
do this.
Robots can
So
do- yeah.
usually I like to start with a two-step automate. Right. So first of all, there are 4 like components. Am I in frame here? 4 components
Yeah.
to an automation. There's the trigger, right? This is like the inciting event. This is the thing that happens that kicks off the whole thing.
Okay.
Um, if let's use automatic bill payment, this is something that most people do or should do.
Should do, yeah.
If you don't want your water turned off, that's maybe happened to somebody on this call. Um, uh, so the trigger is a date, right? The first of the month is the trigger. Then you have the action. This is the thing you want to happen after the trigger triggers. So
Mhm.
the event, the action for automatic bill payment is money is taken out of your account and given to the people you need to pay.
Mhm.
So those are really the two main components to automation. The third component is I'll usually call it routing or conditions, right? So you can check the data that comes in and then change the actions based on the data. So
Mhm.
for me, one of my automations watches Calendly, right? And I have multiple calendar links, multiple types of calendars. So I have a router that says, hey, if this is a one-on-one coaching call, uh, do this one thing, right? Put them in the coaching Airtable, and tag them in ConvertKit as coaching client.
Mhm.
If this is the podcast scheduling link, kick off that whole automation I described earlier, right? So that's routing. And then the fourth component is timing. How often do you want this to happen? Does it need to happen at certain times? Do you want things to happen immediately? The
Mhm.
big benefit between I think Zapier and Make, right, is Zapier, which is like 9 times more expensive than Make, um, abstracts away the operational side of things, right? So Make charges you based on the number of tasks it runs, and Zapier doesn't. They kind of hide all of that stuff. So
Gotcha.
if you never want to think like, but again, for Make, I'm a pretty heavy automator, and I'm paying like $11 a month for Make versus $75 a month I was paying for Zapier. So,
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
for me, I'm willing to do that management stuff because I can do everything I was doing in Make versus Zapier. Um, so, all of that preamble is to say I like to start with two-step automations, right? Because those are easy to test, they're easy to verify, they're easy to make sure they continue working. So,
Mhm.
that the Calendly router, right? At first, that was a one-step automation, Calendly to Airtable.
Yep.
Wasn't doing any routing um at first. When I'm ready to change it, if it's going to be particularly complicated or I'm exploring something, I will clone or duplicate that automation, so that I have a starting point, but that I don't mess up the one that I know is working.
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
And then I'll make some changes and test. And then if that one works, I will turn off the old one and turn on the new one.
I'm over here laughing because I'm like, "Now he tells me." 'Cause I've totally done it. Completely done that. It's like, "Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a simple little tweak," and then boing,
Yeah,
wires
it's
everywhere, nothing's
yep,
ever working. We long time I used to use a thing called Slogger, which was Python script written by my buddy Brett Terpster. And what it was
nice.
for is you were logging all your social media stuff, right? So, because at one point, you got your Twitter things, you got your LinkedIn things, you got your Instagram was sort of semi brand new at the time. You're writing stuff on Facebook and whatever, and it would take all your posts and send them to day one. And then I
Nice.
could flag a certain words. And if I use a particular hashtag, it would stick it on my WordPress site as a post, so you could have your
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
And then Instagram did something and they broke it, and I ended up with thousands of dead links in my WordPress. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
'cause they moved their, when they got big, they had to move their images to like a different AWS type server, and it broke
Yeah.
everything. I was so mad because it took so long. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe I can write something to rename all of these pages in WordPress, and it was working. And then I decided to tweak it and make it cuter, and it just went boom. And I should have
Yes.
been like, Joe, what the heck, man? And then my friend goes, well, why did you set it up with shut up, go away. Short links, and shut up. That's only for YouTube. No, it's not. You can use it for all
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
do
Ah!
for everything. Yep.
Yeah, thinking
But
about it from a
yeah.
simple standpoint really, I think that helps people getting started and also reminds us overcomplicators to not overcomplicate.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Because my friend said that when I'm automating, it's like I'm playing 9D chess. And I'm like, I don't. That's just. I've been thinking like a programmer for like over half, like 2/3 of my life at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but like, I just wrote a blog post recently called "Automation Can Be Simple," and that serves as a reminder for me, as much as everybody who's looking at the automations I'm sharing, going, I could never build something like this. So like most of them should be right. Like
Yeah.
I have an automation that lets me easily um store all of my social media posts like from the beginning, right? Because like I have a repurposing content flywheel, and everything starts with a Google Doc. I press a button on my Stream Deck, it creates a Google Doc, right? That was the
Yeah.
only thing it did for a while, right?
Hmm.
But I want some place where that is more easily indexable and viewable than Google Docs or Google Drive. So the next part of the automation, right? This is where I iterated was, oh yeah, also send like the title of this document and the link to the document to an Airtable base called social posts, right? Then my VA can just go in there and repurpose content as she needs, right?
Yep.
Um and then I thought, well, this is great, but if I don't use a word I want to like a keyword in the title, if I use it somewhere in the body in the content, it's not going to show up in search. So I had my VA look through, like go through all of the documents and add the actual content from the document into Airtable so that I had a starting point there for all back catalog stuff. And then I updated the automation to not just send the title and the link, but also the actual content of the document to put it in one of the long form fields in Airtable. So
Hmm.
now instead of going to Google Docs, I go to Airtable and I search, oh, did I talk about automation should be simple recently on social media? No, I didn't. I'll create a new post for that. Um, but that was a 3-step iteration based on my needs and what I thought would improve my workflows.
Super
That's
brilliant.
awesome.
Just super
Oh man.
brilliant.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think for everyone who's thinking about like, okay, well, where do I get started? Whatever. Think of something that you do, like you said,
Yeah.
repetitively every week, and you wish there was an easier way, and try to automate one portion of it, and then add to it, and then add to it, and add to it. I think the low hanging fruit for everyone here, the majority of the people nowadays have smart lights at some place in their life. Somewhere you have a Hue
Yeah.
something, right? If it's
Yep.
not a Hue, it's a LifeX, or maybe you went super cheap and bought Amazon brand Govee, whatever. I don't
Yep.
care. But I am blown away by how many of my friends that bought all of this smart stuff and have not automated a single piece of it. And like, well, what do you mean? If I walk out of my office and I get outside of my building, the minute my phone disconnects from this Wi-Fi, the front door locks.
Yeah.
It should
Yep.
already be locked, but if it didn't, it will automatically lock the door. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I go outside and then I'm standing out there, and then my friend, my next door neighbor comes by and say, "Hey, let's go grab some coffee." All right, cool. And I'll go to Starbucks. I'll come back and have left the office open for like, 20 minutes. Now it
Yep.
automatically shuts, right? My other half will never admit to being afraid of the dark. But when the car pulls into the driveway based off of her phone, it turns the lights on in the house.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
those are
Like sim.
low-hanging fruit that you can do.
When
True.
when the bedroom lights turn off after like 9 p.m., lock the
Yep.
front
Yes.
door, right? Because
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
what's a conversation that everybody has ever had with their significant other?
Yeah.
Did you
Did you
lock the
lock the
front
door?
door?
Did you lock the
Yep.
I
door? Yeah.
don't.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'll just go check. Right?
I
Like
have
that's
my
yeah.
lights designed to go off. All the lights in the house go off at 12. And I had to do that because if I didn't, I would stay up. It used to be, Call of Duty, and then it would turn into like, Madden or FIFA. But I just left them that way now. Now I'm old enough, my ass is definitely sleep by then. But it was just the point because I would forget and I would just be up. And then you got to be somewhere at like 5 in the morning.
You're like
It's
sitting
Yeah.
there and
oh,
all the lights turn off. You're like, oh.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the
My
sign. That's the
my
sign.
my office
Yeah.
lights at 6 p.m. turn red, and that's like, hey, You should probably
Oh,
go
I
upstairs and
like that
hang out with your
one.
Yeah,
family. Yeah.
I like
yeah,
Yeah.
that
and
one. I also like that you were saying before we jumped on the podcast that you had like a warning light outside your door
Yeah.
so that family knew that you were recording or live streaming or doing
yeah.
what you're doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are all great. Yeah,
And everybody
visual
wants to buy a
cues. Yeah,
fancy button, right? They want to buy a fancy on air button or whatever. And a lot of people, they're not the good ones are expensive. Well, I won't say expensive. The good ones are pricey. The ones that just are plastic with a little slide in, that you're
yeah,
going
that's
to
like
forget to
ours.
turn it on. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
And they're
the
they're
same.
very out there. You're going to forget to turn it
Yeah,
on, so it's not going to work, right? Other things that you could do, like okay, so if you have a person, like if Paul sends me a text and I know that I can have it so that if I have certain words in it, Paul could text me a word, it would actually change one of the lamps in my room to that color, and I will know. This is all stuff you can do in IFTTT, right?
Yeah.
So what I used to do is I had, if it's going to rain when I'm up in the morning, one of my lights would be purple, right? If it's a Red Sox game today, one of my lights would be red. So that way I can remember to set the DVR, right? Just dumb
Nice.
stuff like that. If I
Yeah.
got an email from one of my clients that pays really well, it would change my lights, right? So I know to check. My lights would go ding, 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 and I would just, hey, all right, let me check this real quick. And
Yeah.
that one I had to turn off because they would text me in the middle of a podcast. But it's easy stuff that you can do with Philips Hue, right? And
Right.
IFTTT, which is horrible now. I'm sure Mate can do the same thing. But yeah,
I
so those are
It's
the
so
kind of stuff you
funny.
can set up.
IFTTT like got worse when they started charging, which is weird. I
Yeah,
still
they
pay
did.
for it, right? Because one of the things that I do, right, is I live stream every Monday usually, and I have it. I have IFTT connected to YouTube and my Hue light, so that when someone sends me a super chat or a super sticker, my lights blink. And it's like if they send me $1, I think they blink like red. If they send me $5, they blink blue or whatever.
yeah,
Um, each level has like a color associated it with YouTube, and so YouTube sends that color to Philips Hue. But like when I'm on the live stream, if my lights start blinking, right, I know to give somebody a shout out, and they just made something happen in my house, which is super cool. But
yeah.
yeah, so that's really great. It also kind of gives me a reason to ask for super chats and super stickers, right? I don't like, oh, just duke me money right now. Where I say like, if you want to make my lights blink, um but Ecamm Live is great for, it's got shortcut support for when you open the app, when
Yeah.
you close the app, when you go live, and when you're done going live. So, um, the one of the shortcuts I have is as soon as I turn Ecamm Live on, it's a fair assumption that I'm going to be recording or at least using the virtual camera. So I'll be talking to somebody, right, in a meeting.
Yep.
And so it kicks off a shortcut that upstairs turns my recording light on. My
I
family
still
knows
love
that.
that. I wanna set that one
Yeah.
up in my house. That'll be
Yeah.
awesome.
And I'll tell you, like Doc said, I overthought this. I'm like, I gotta find a smart on-air light. And then I was like, or I can buy like a $10 sconce, put it on my drywall outside of my office, and
Yeah,
then get a Philips Hue light. And I'm like,
yeah,
what? It's just
yeah.
that everybody wants the fancy on-air light. And I'm like, this is dumb. This is just a signal so that my family knows I'm recording.
Yeah,
I don't need to
and no
spend.
one sees it but your family, so yeah, I
Yeah,
know,
right,
Yeah.
and, like, you
we're
think
super
they
guilty of
care?
that.
They don't care.
Yeah.
No.
My kids don't even care that it's red, right?
I
Yeah,
just love
mine
to
would
hear
still
you
come
say
in.
scones because
Yeah,
every time I
Yeah.
say that, people look at me like, why would whoever uses that word? Me and
Oh,
Joe,
I
damn
we
it.
use it. I
that's right,
use
yeah,
it.
yeah, heck
Yeah.
yeah.
One of my favorite words. I need a
Yeah.
new scones.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like we're gonna have you back, Joe, because it seems to me, and based on the comments we're seeing here, and even just my own personal feelings, we need to have like a automation workshop, or like it would be fun to really work on some of these together. Cause I'm sure that there's probably like, 5 or 10 that are really relevant to anyone that's doing live streaming or podcasting that are probably pretty easy to set up, and we could literally just walk through them together.
Yeah, for
It would be
sure,
really fun.
absolutely.
It would be super,
Yeah.
super fun.
And guys, like just some of this stuff is like we were saying, very easy stuff that you can do. A good place to start is Apple Reminders. It has,
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's built into your phone, it's built into your iPad, it's built into your computer, and you can do simple things like when I get to Costco, remind me to buy Kirkland toilet paper
Mhm.
because June 1st is the beginning of hurricane season here, and the first thing that happens, they go, "Oh, there's going to be a hurricane," and then the line at Costco gets stupid. So the
Mm.
smart move is to go get it now. But nobody in my state will do that except me.
Mm.
And then,
That's
Yeah.
and like June 2nd, all of a sudden, Costco
Uh,
gas is lines are long, water bottles can't be found. Like some of you guys live in Hurricane Alley, you know what life is like. Do it now before hurricane season starts, right? And you can do simple stuff like that with automation. Remind yourself these things.
in the Boston area, it's always bread and milk. It was the most like weird thing about moving here. Like there'd be a snowstorm, and like you'd go to the grocery store and there'd be no bread or milk, and you're like, who is buying bread
yeah,
and milk during
yeah.
this? Like,
What
what about
what are
bottled
you gonna
water and
do?
toilet
Yeah,
paper? Yeah, what are you gonna do with bread and milk? But yeah,
You
yeah.
can
here
use
it's like a
bread for
giant
both.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yeah, maybe
yeah,
it's both.
exactly.
Yeah,
In New
yeah,
York, it was like milk and eggs, and I'm like, "What? Who's eating all these? Why are
yeah,
we only
yeah,
eating eggs when it's snowing?" Like, what? So,
yeah.
um, I was
Oh,
always super paranoid that I would get into like a really good groove and forget to go pick up my children, like from the bus stop or from
I
daycare.
I've
And
actually been
so,
really guilty of that. Like my children get
yeah,
dropped off at a bus stop, and I like for a while when they were little, the bus driver needed to see my face to know that I was home, and I
yeah.
missed that all the time. Like the bus would be like standing out, so like honking.
Yeah, and, like, my
Yeah.
daughter, like, the bus stop is, like, a block and a half away, and my
Oh
daughter is
no.
6, and, like, it
Yeah.
just feels everything. She's, like, a very strong empath already, so, like, she'd be like, "Why
Yeah.
did you forget me?" So, like, I always when I get to the bus stop in the morning, if I get to the crossroad at a certain time, and when I drop my kids off at the daycare, I have a reminder automatically created, for 2:55 and then 4:55 to go pick up the kids.
Oh.
I've to date, I've never forgotten them, which is really nice. Like,
Yeah.
I've never even needed the reminder, like, I'm always like, about 10 minutes, I'm like, "I gotta go," but if I'm, like, in it if I'm, like, really in the zone, right,
Yeah.
I know
That's
I'm
what
not gonna
happens.
forget to pick up my children.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, everyone is saying yes, yes to workshops, yes to follow-ups on this. So we will definitely have to schedule that. I'm always amazed. Like this, I know an hour goes by quickly, but holy cow, an hour goes by quickly
Yeah,
on
wow.
these shows. Oh my goodness. Any other final questions, Doc, or anything, Joe, we haven't covered that we should
I'm just
include
looking
in
real
this
quick.
one?
People don't. Um, I didn't see anybody put any cues in there, so
I
yeah, we
know,
can just
yeah.
run with it. That was actually pretty good. Most people are most people are just jaw dropped at the moment, but yes. So I appreciate this, Joe. It's a very good thing. People, by the way, check out how I built a podcast. I remember
Yes.
now what it was I was doing. I had left and gone to Squarespace for a long time, and then I had to build a WordPress site for a friend. And in the beginning, you talked to lots of WordPress people, and I was trying to make sure that I was catching up to speed. So I would listen to you and then the automatic
Oh my god,
podcasts and things like that. So yeah, that's exactly what it was. Now I remember.
amazing. I'm
That's,
gonna, like, blush here, Doc, because I watched all of your Ecamm Live 4 videos
I'm
recently, and
sorry
I'm like,
for
"Oh,
you.
man, this guy's a rock star." No, it was great. The LinkedIn one especially, um, it was,
Oh,
like, really helpful for me. So, well,
oh,
thank you. I
good.
really
Yeah.
appreciate that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. If you guys need to have any questions or whatever, please reach out to us and we'll send it along to Joe. You can follow Joe yourself. Go to casabona.org. Did I say that right? Did I guess that?
Yeah,
Yes.
that is correct.
All right, cool.
You can, put a little Italian flair on, like Casabona, right? Good house,
Yes,
you know?
Sorry,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I like it.
the New York thing just leaked out.
yeah.
I mean, you said you had 2 extra kids during the pandemic. It's like, tell me you're Italian without telling me you're Italian. Anyway.
I know, I'm Italian, my wife's Irish Catholic, it was bound to
Oh
happen, I
Oh,
think.
goodness, it
It was
was
gonna
yeah.
yeah,
happen. That's
testing.
auto dude, you were just trying to do the New York thing, right?
Yeah.
Really yeah,
Oh,
really, I try to keep
Wait,
my accent on a low burn, right? Because if I turn it on and I talk about getting coffee and getting clothes out of my drawer,
oh,
nobody
I
knows what I'm
love
talking
it.
about.
No, I
hey,
love it.
India
Oh,
would love
it's
you.
the
India would
best.
be like,
Yeah.
"You're" All right, guys. So don't forget, you can follow the flow wherever your podcast getting is got. If you go to flow.ecam.com, it will take you to most places. And also, don't remember, don't forget, it is now that the YouTube button is available. It is on YouTube Music. Hashtag Doc was right. You can send us story requests or guests, wannabe things. My brain just went a little bit left. It's at flow at flow@ecamm.com. That's how you send us an email. And another thing, speaking about automation, dun, 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 we would like to thank the script for helping us put this together. The script is our favorite app because in the Ecamm, when you're done your recording, your podcast, you can press send to the script. And all of a sudden, you're ready to edit your podcast, create social media posts, and fix all of the places where Doc randomly speaks Japanese. And Katie's like, what the heck is that?
It's just like Doc is speaking Japanese in brackets. So just ignore
In
this part of the
brackets.
script.
Right. So the script is available. People, please go and check it out. Just tell them this part of Ecamm fan. We have a special code for you in the ecamm.com/blog/perks. If you jump over there, you can get yourself a little discount code. So thank you guys for always being here with us on The Flow. As we say each and every week, Flow Riders out. All right, gang.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
That was
Thank you,
super cool.
Joe.
Thanks, Joe. That was amazing.
Thank you. This is great.
Anybody that wants to tweak out, I am doing Final Cut Pro on the iPad in like an hour. And I'm starting from zero. I literally just downloaded it. I didn't want to touch anything, which is really hard. I've been wanting to mess with it, but I'm like, I want to prove everybody. They're like, I don't know how to, because nobody knows how. We all starting today. So we're all at zero. So your excuse is stupid. Let's go.
No one knows
wait,
how.
Luis
Love
has a
it.
question. Luis is here in the corner with a question.
Yes,
No, he
I
just bring
am
his
going
big
to
head over.
interject. No, I'm going to interject because everything was so awesome and the conversation was so genuine that I didn't want to touch anything. But for the Flow Riders and the people who are here live get to see this, I'm actually going to ask Doc to do a reread because the one thing missing on today's awesome episode is a good introduction of Joe. And so we're going to do a 5-second countdown. We're going to go in Katie, and then Doc is going to introduce Joe. But this is the whole thing. This is the key word that I need you to use, Doc, okay? Joe Self. Because that's exactly the part where Joe actually started introducing himself, where he said, hey, tell us, Joe, about Joe Self. So that's the key word. Make an introduction and then lead it off with Joe Self, right? As the cue. And then Joe just has to stay here because he already did all the work in the actual show. So we're just going to rerun the intro.
Joe gets all the gold stars and Doc has to redo. This is my favorite part of any episode, Luis. I'm really loving this.
All
Do you
right,
know,
well, we're gonna do
was I looking straight at the camera or was I looking at the screen? Do you know?
Don't worry about
Guess
that.
it
That's
doesn't matter for the
me to take
podcast.
care of
Yeah.
because, like I said, you already did it. So I could even actually use the original version of you and just
Perfect.
interlace Doc's new intro on top of it, and that's what I'll be doing in the editing process in the background. So
Nice.
we're gonna go back from the intro. Actually, no, just from the two up of Doc and Katie. Do your 5-second countdown and introduce Joe. All right.
Move your head.
I can remove it in post.
A blooper reel. I love
That's
it.
super funny. This is something that we do all of the time in Twit, right? Is we do pre-reads and after reads and rereads, and so it's something a lot
We
of
should
people
do these
don't
kinds
do.
of things. I'm so
but
bad
yeah.
at intro stuff. Yeah. All right.
I remember when Caleb said to give things to promote the show after. This is what Caleb is talking about. This is what they meant. And 5, 4. This week we have an amazing guest, all right? He's built many, many things and actually has a show called How You Built It. So this week we're going to bring on Joe Casabona, but rather than do the long bio, Joe, why don't you explain to us about Joe Self?
Did we get it? Did we get it? Oh, wait. Luis, you're
Actually,
muted.
that's it. Now, do you want to do it another one with an aloha as the intro?
No.
Overthinking it?
Okay,
Nope,
then
we're
I'll
good.
fix it all in. We're good to go, and we'll see how I work my
Awesome.
magic on next week's replay episode, and we're good to go. Flow
I love
Riders
this. I
out.
love it.